Greetings, Internet. I am Enderier, also called Greg Campbell. I am about to do something that I've never seen done before, and that is make Dark Souls, the original one, technically the remaster, even harder by replacing all enemies and bosses with bosses. And not just any bosses, random bosses. And not only that, I'll also be replacing all items with random items, at least all that the randomizers will allow. So, this is my attempt at fame, fortune, and good success. Congratulations, Internet! This is your entertainment. And in this video, we'll be explaining how to set up this ludicrously high difficulty. Or potentially high difficulty. Anyway. The name of this difficulty, as suggested by one of my friends, is Hot Mess. If you want to use another term, my initial thought would be, oops, with a question mark, all bosses. And for a third option, Lord of Cinder, because, hey, this is Dark Souls. So, what are the parameters of this difficulty setting? Well, first, on the item randomization side, change the difficulty to very unfair. Next, for key placement, do shuffled or race mode. I do not recommend race mode plus because I don't like soft blocks. For soul items, pick your favorite. For starting items, pick shield and one or two-handed weapon because that adds extra challenge. Fashion Souls is optional. Laundromat Mix-Up is optional. Senile Guinevere is optional, although if it's on, you might get the Lord Vessel early. Senile Primordial Serpent is also optional. You might get some of the Lord Souls early, but you also might not. And that's it for that randomization. And next, for enemy randomization, which is the more interesting part, we will replace bosses only with bosses. And we will replace normal enemies either with bosses or with normal enemies, and set the boss chance to 100%, or we just choose only with bosses and we roll with that, because that is effectively the same thing. Shall we replace NPCs? That is entirely up to you. I assume it only matters if you're killing them. For the mode, we are either doing fully random or fully random plus easy asylum. Now, I don't recommend hard asylum just because you might end up with an unwinnable situation in the asylum. I've seen some of the monstrosities that can spawn in the asylum, and I don't recommend that for anyone who wants to enjoy this mode. But again, this is Dark Souls. Do as you see fit. And enemy placement. I only recommend putting them where they will fit because there's a difference between difficult and dying because enemies attacked you through walls. And then this happens over and over and over. And you have no counter because they attack you through walls. And it is sad. For the second page, mimics, replace them. Gargoyle 2, replace it. T-posing enemies. Pick your option. I'm choosing enabled so that enemies that are normally not attacking or that normally don't start attacking will be the same this way. For example, in the area under Firelink Shrine, which I call the basement, that leads to New Orlando, normally there are a bunch of hollows that are wailing and crying and on their knees. So a T-posing enemy in this case might be Gwyn, Lord of Cinder. It might be Artorias, the boss. It might be one of the four kings, and so on and so forth. Doing it with enabled means that you have a farm spot, and you don't need to rely on just being super skilled with this game. Okay, on being super duper hyper extra ultra skilled with this game. Also, enabling this allows you to actually play through a lot more of the game instead of just increasing the difficulty arbitrarily. Next, for preventing a replacement with the same enemy, do as you see fit. We're already fighting all bosses. Congratulations. For type replacement, I chose disabled so that each enemy is potentially unique, and so that we aren't fighting a long string of hollows that suddenly all became Sif, or Pinwheel, or Gwyn, Lord of Cinder. For Pinwheel Chaos, it is on. The Gwyn spawn rate nerf. Choose whichever version you want. However, I recommend strongly nerfing this because if you leave it off, then you might have found what I have found, which is 6 Gwyns in the depths in a short space, and 4 Gwyns in Blighttown in a short space. And there are only so many times that I can fight Gwyn in a short space and have it be interesting. And as for trying for unique bosses, do as you see fit. I chose enabled just so that things are less likely to be repetitious in the boss slot fights. And when I say boss slot fights, I mean when you enter a boss room and it shows the enemy name and the enemy HP, or the HP bar. For example, if you go to the Bell Gargoyles fight, there are 2 enemies. Normally there are 2 Bell Gargoyles, but in this one, they'll be replaced with whatever. Or if you go to the Taurus Demon fight, there's that one Taurus Demon who will be replaced with something in this mode. And finally, for this last page, bosses replacing normal enemies respawning. This means that if you have a boss that replaces a normal enemy, like we do, then if you kill it, then it will come back when you rest at a bonfire. Yes, 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 and yes. And when I say bonfire, I also mean upon dying or warping. So, ensure this is enabled. Hostile NPCs. Pick your version. I chose no just in case, because I don't want to be confused by a stray hostile Andre or something like that. And respawning mosquito replacement, it's optional, but I do not recommend it at all because all enemies will be replaced by bosses. And I don't recommend that you just turn on a Gwyn spawner, or a Sif spawner, or a boss spawner in general, because if these enemies require more than a bow shot, or a throwing knife, or something of similar effort to defeat, and they're infinitely spawning, then they will overwhelm you and possibly crash your game. Because in Blighttown, there are already enough things that are likely to slow down your game. One other thing of note is that I'm calling this seed on each of the randomizers as the same thing. This is for my purposes. It is totally optional. So in each case, I'm calling it Jesus is Lord of Cinder. And go ahead, say the name, Jesus is Lord of Cinder. And if you want, laugh, because I thought it was cute and a bit clever and somewhat funny. But anyway, we are about to start this randomization. In 3, 2, 1. And now we wait. And while we wait, we can do something like breathe deeply. Hallelujah. All right, everyone. We are about to find out in the next video what we actually got in terms of enemy and item placement. We are starting with a new game character, although I do have a new game plus character ready to go just in case. Thank you, everyone. Good night, and God bless.